Sex is big business in America. And while some of the people in that business aren't there by choice, many consider themselves sex workers, willing participants in the nation's multi-billion-dollar sex trade. Across the country, it's a dangerous and illegal industry. Some workers think changing the laws around prostitution could make it safer. But what would that look like? I came to Nevada to see the only place in the US where sex for money is legal and out of the shadows. Deep in the desert, you'll find the only legal prostitution in America. There are 21 legal brothels in the US, all here in Nevada, and none are more recognizable than Dennis Hoff's Moonlight Bunny Ranch. You're looking at the exception, the most elite, privileged form of commercial sex in this country. It takes some resources to even get this job. You have to be able to afford a license from the local sheriff and pass a thorough background check. I came here to hear the arguments in favor of legal and regulated sex work.
I'll take you to my room.
The women here are independent contractors and call themselves working girls. The house takes half of whatever they make during a transaction, what they'd call a party or a booking. Tiara Tay is 22 and was a dancer until she came here 2 months ago. While you were dancing, were you ever approached to do this illegally?
Yeah, I was propositioned every night.
And did you ever even consider it?
No, I never thought I'd be doing this. I was like, oh, I'll never do that. But then I heard like it's legal and where the girls are tested, like I gave it a chance. To be honest, I used to like talk down on it, like paying someone for sex, but now my whole mindset's changed and I'm a part of it. I got picked like my first time and I was like, I'm scared.
And then how did that happen? Like, how did that go down?
It was good. Like, I just walked him through the house and then we came back in my room and we booked. It was good to get off my shoulders because, like, my first time standing in lineup, it is intimidating.
Was it what you thought it would be?
Yeah. You just stand there, say your name, and see what he does.
No, but the first booking that you had.
It was really easy. It went really smooth, and it was what I thought it was going to be. As soon as I found out I was going to be doing this, I kind of started going through goals in my head, like, what am I going to do with this money? You know, I need to start a retirement fund. There's like a couple days where I'll go without booking.
And what's that like?
I mean, it sucks, but I try and stay positive.
How long do you see yourself doing this?
The next 8 years.
Yeah? Mm-hmm. 8 is such a specific number and you want to be here for 8 years. Mm-hmm. Do you have a number goal that you want to hit by that time?
Like money-wise,
mm-hmm.
I should have $500,000 by then, easily. Easily. Yeah. I should have $500,000 in the next few years. I'm not gonna lie, I'm expensive, and if they can afford it and if they're willing to do it, I will, break my boundaries to a certain extent. Some people look at it like, oh, she's a prostitute, she's a whore. Yeah, I am, but it's a job, and it's not gonna be forever. I'm getting money. That's great.
Yeah, hold on.
That's the bell.
What's the bell?
So that's the lineup. That'll be the time the customer will stand in front and then the girls will come out. We kind of have to hurry or else they're gonna start without us.
So there's a lineup happening, which means a customer just came through and the girls are going to line up and the customer is going to take their pick.
Hi, I'm Tiara.
So all of the girls are doing introductions. Everyone's dressed up, and it's funny because their hands are behind their back and it seems like they're a little shy from where I'm looking, but they're introducing themselves to the client and he looks like he just picked a girl, the one straight in the middle, and he is walking her back now.
So I didn't get picked, but that's okay.
Yeah? Can you kind of explain to me how it feels every time, or is it just when it happens, it happens?
Yeah, it's just if he picks you, great. If not, then you wait for the next bell.
Hey, you guys, you got to calm it down in there. Yeah. All right, we ready? We're going to have some fun.
Dennis Hoff is the owner and proprietor of the Moonlight Bunny Ranch and 6 other Nevada brothels. He's a businessman and a libertarian with political aspirations. And when it comes to laws around prostitution, he's one of the biggest advocates for legalization. Do you feel like you are empowering these women?
Oh, there's no question. There's no question. These are true businesswomen. We're empowering these girls. I mean, over half of our girls have college educations. 20-some% have master's degrees. I have 3 PhDs working for me. One of them is a professor at UNLV and a working girl for me. These girls are real businesswomen.
How many girls are applying to work for you a month?
1,000. If it's some girl that I think I'm really interested in, which would be typically a very attractive girl, a hot blonde, or a mixed girl that I think is unique, then I might get involved in it myself. We think we are a family. We're all a close-knit little community here that supports each other. The difference is we can have sexual interaction too, and the girls do it.
Can you define the word pimp in your own terms?
A pimp, in its simplest term, is a man that brings men or women to girls for sex. Okay, so in the simplest term, I'm a pimp. But I have a license. I have a business license to do this.
So you're a legal pimp?
I'm a legal pimp, absolutely. But in the street vernacular, in most people's thoughts, a pimp is a guy that goes to Kansas City, grabs underage girls, runaways, fills them up with drugs, and owns them and hauls them around to Oakland, Las Vegas, the sexual cesspool of America. So when you legalize something, who do you take out of the business? You take the underage girls out, because every girl here has to go down and get a business license, be fingerprinted, photographed. They run the federal check on them. Who else can't get in the business? The pimps. This business, the prostitution business worldwide, is a dirty, disgusting, drug-ridden, exploitive, disease-ridden business till you legalize it. And when you make it legal, everything changes. The whole game changes.
I think once you get past the photos of nudity everywhere, you realize that this is kind of just like any other business establishment. They don't even use, I guess, sexual terms in casual conversation about it. They refer to it as a business transaction because that's what they see it as. And just like any other business, there are safety regulations here. The women here go through thorough background checks and weekly STD tests, and someone could listen in at any time. There are security cameras and panic buttons, which is a lot different than the outside world of illegal prostitution.
Hi, I'm Willow. I've been here about 10 years.
And what's your title?
My title?
Yeah, like what do you call
I'm a prostitute. I'm a hooker.
If a young girl says that she wants to do this one day, what's typically your response?
No, have you thought it through? Because no, it's not for everybody. It's definitely not for everybody. No, go to school first. I'm not going to be telling kids come work here. No, ooh, gross.
Yeah?
Yeah, ooh, gross, no. Unless you're being a hooker on the street, this is a better option. Unless you're stripping, this might be a better option. If you go into the outside world, we're going into their space, right? We're going into their house, into their hotel room, places that they've scoped out, right? That's their space.
A lot of the safety that you talk about is because you're in a brothel. So this is kind of the environment that it's already happening in. Do you think that it would be smart to legalize prostitution and let people do this independently outside of a brothel environment?
The thing is, what you're asking is something that's already happening. You're asking me if it's safe, but it's happening regardless. So what's the harm in legalizing it? It's only putting more safety measures in for the girls. Somebody's might be taking charge of their license plate. Some people can call the cops if they feel unsafe or insecure. You have that safety net. Yeah, I think legalizing it is, the best way to go.
There are a few different legal models for approaching the sex trade. Legalization is what we saw at the Bunny Ranch. It is the introduction of laws to control the sex trade, which means it's highly regulated. But there are other models across the world when it comes to prostitution. One is criminalization. Every part of the sex trade is illegal, and people are arrested and charged for it. It's the policy across the country, including where I'm from, in DC. The vast majority of the sex trade in the US happens outside of brothels and illegally. I wanted to find out how criminalizing prostitution affects people working in the sex trade, so I met up with Leah Monadas, a local artist and activist who engaged in what is known as survival sex during a period of homelessness.
So this area here in DC is like where probably a lot of the girls have worked. It's kind of transitioned from uptown a little to here, and then it goes all the way down for about probably a half mile, maybe a mile that way. The thing is, when you're a trans woman of color, what happens is that, like, particularly when you're doing sex work, a lot of the men don't respect you. They don't really think of you as a human being. They don't, you're just like an object to them. Even less so than like a cisgender woman. Oftentimes, they're not afraid to hurt you. And additionally, because you're a sex worker, they feel like, well, she can't even report this to the police. Right. So I can do whatever I want to you, right?
Did you feel like you couldn't report it to the police?
Absolutely. Because what am I going to what's my excuse for being in the strange man's car, right? Or what's my excuse for being in this man's apartment or house?
Yeah.
So it's terrifying, it's scary. You don't want to report these things to the police. So consequently, a lot of sex workers' lives are really fragile. It's really scary. And a lot of the girls out here do die or get injured, and oftentimes it doesn't get reported.
Were there experiences that you had while you were doing this for your own survival that you felt like your life was at enormous risk?
Yeah, so there were a few times where I was almost murdered.
You say that so casually. That's like such a... When
you've been through this, you are strong as a rock.
Yeah.
I have no fear anymore because I've been so close to death several times. I was in a car. This guy was speeding off. He didn't want to give me a donation. He ended up pulling a knife on me, and before I jumped out, he stabbed me twice, and then finally was able to open the door, and I was able to get out. But I moved out of probably 40 mile per hour plus car. And I just rolled around, and I honestly, when I got up after rolling around, I was surprised I was still alive. And I was like, okay, adrenaline rushing, I'd just been stabbed, so then I ran and I took off, right? And amazingly, I thought he was done, but he turned the car around and then tried to chase me to run me over. So it was just, and then the worst part is I couldn't even report this to police. What am I gonna say? I was doing sex work and some man then tried to kill me.
What are some of the ways decriminalizing prostitution would make it safer for sex workers?
Well, for one, they could screen their clients a little better. They could talk to them a little more in the street and kind of assess, maybe even look around the car. They'll have a little extra time so they could see that knife maybe he's stashing by the door. They might see a gun that they didn't see before. They might be able to get their license plates down because they have more time. That way if something bad does happen, they can report it. Honestly, just being able to report stuff, if someone hurts you, you weren't afraid then to go to the cops. Yeah, I laugh about it because I have to create this barrier.
Of course, yeah.
But the truth is, it was completely terrifying. I don't wish that upon any human being ever, but it happens, and it happens. Any one of these girls, if I can do anything to help a young trans person or other sex worker, cis woman, to not have that happen to them, I will do it. I don't care what the cost is, because I don't want that to ever happen to another human being again. I'm not a piece of trash. I'm a human being, and I don't deserve to be treated that way. I'm breaking down a little.
You're absolutely
People don't
right.
deserve that. Yeah.
No one does.
Stories like Leia's aren't that rare. We've heard similar stories of violence from sex workers who didn't want to talk to us on camera. But because the sex trade is an underground industry, national statistics are really hard to come by. Here's what we do know. At least 34 sex workers across the US were murdered in 2017. And a study of New York street sex workers found that up to 80% had experienced violence while working. Leia's experience is representative in another way. Nationally, trans women engage in sex work at a much higher rate than people who aren't trans. And in DC, 85% of trans sex workers are Black and Latino. Now, Leah's story is at the center of a push for change.
We're headed into a briefing at the DC Council talking about laws surrounding commercial sex. And in this area, there's a movement pushing for decriminalization.
Decriminalization is the removal of laws criminalizing the sex trade. Rather than regulating the sex trade, decriminalization just means people don't get charged for it. Removing criminal penalties is the logical first step for advocates like Leah, and it could eventually be a stepping stone on the way to legalization. This is a super early stage hearing, and Newsy had the only cameras in the room.
So good morning, everybody. I am Councilmember David Grosso. I'm an at-large council member here in the District of Columbia. The fact is that decriminalizing sex work, moving towards an approach that is more based in human rights is something that has been on my agenda now since Amnesty International came out a year ago with changing their approach.
It's not just Amnesty International. The World Health Organization and the UN's Program on AIDS have also supported removing criminal penalties for prostitution.
I want to make that clear that not all sex workers do sex work out of desperation, and some choose the profession. But I felt that, for me, I had no other choice.
We have a few minutes to take questions, and I'd love to facilitate some questions for the panel. So we'll start in the back, please. Go ahead.
Why would we decriminalize a profession that has such danger like that? And why go back to it as opposed to go through social services to get out of that, right? That's going to be a common question that people are going to ask.
So when you're doing something that's illegal, it becomes difficult to report it, right? So consequently, if you decriminalize sex work, if a man knows that he could potentially go to jail for assaulting me or pulling a knife on me, he's less likely to do it. But if he knows I'm not even probably going to report this, he knows he's more likely to get away with murder.
There's many reasons why there's violence. They don't inherently relate to sex work as a practice. It's more due to the criminalization than the work. So that's my broad answer.
There is widespread harm being done in the sex trade. There's exploitation, there's violence, there's discrimination, incarceration, disease, and of course, stigma. But we've realized in our reporting that people experience the sex trade on a spectrum. One of the working girls we talked to off camera at the Bunny Ranch used to work here in DC illegally, but she worked for a high-end escort service like this one. On one end of that sex trade spectrum, you have things like the Bunny Ranch and maybe even these high-end escort sites. But on the opposite end of that spectrum, you have terrible instances of trafficking and exploitation. But in between, there's a whole range of experiences, from some of the people on Backpage to some of the most marginalized members of our communities who are in the streets and selling sex in order to survive. And the thing is, these laws affect all of these people. So finding a solution, whatever that solution may be, is way more complicated than you think.
This policy to decriminalize commercial sex could be super controversial. I sat down with the council member who proposed the legislation to talk about people's concerns.
One of the pet peeves I have as a policymaker is that we keep trying the same thing over and over again and it doesn't work. For something like this, where you have two consenting adults that are exchanging some sort of money for sex, I don't see why that should have someone go to jail for that. But then also I think it's important that we remove the stigma from what this is about so that people can feel more comfortable asking for help if that's what they need.
Does this legislation encourage prostitution?
That's a trickier question. I don't think so, but we're not sure. And when you look at New Zealand, where they've already done this for over 10 years, we see that it doesn't.
Are you hopeful this will pass?
hopeful is a good word. Yes, I always have hope, but I'm not confident that it will. I don't know if my colleagues are ready yet.
This is the first time Councilmember Grasso publicly introduces the legislation to decriminalize sex work, and it's a packed room, and people are pretty excited. You can tell that this is a really big deal.
Our goal should be to stop violence, not criminalize those who are working to survive. Sex workers are active members of the DC community too. And it's time we respect them with dignity, like we do the rest of the community. We're all human beings. Thank you.